Now let's rig this thing. So we're going to use 3 joints for this, even though we have a lot more tendrils than that. So we'll go to character and then add a joint. And this joint is perfectly centered, which is actually quite good. Maybe we can move it back just so it's kind of in the middle of this thing. Now we'll control drag and copy a joint in here, and then do the same thing and move it up so that these two are in the same layer. So if we move this, you can see we have this joint here, and obviously the same thing. So these two are independent from one another. But we're going to keep them all at 0, 0, 0. Or, well, I guess we're a little bit back in the Z. Let's actually change that to 0 and then just move everything forward. The mirror and the mirror flesh, we can just move that so it's all centered. And for the mirror flesh, we can press L and move this center, or this axis, kind of right in the middle. So now we're a little bit more centered out. Now to organize this, I'm just going to drop in a null, change it to mirror, and then drop everything inside of that. So to rig this, I'll middle click this to select all 3 of the joints, and then control click here. So everything's selected, or just, shift click all through here. Then we'll go to character and bind. Now if we double click on this little weight tag here, you can see we can paint on it. If we shift double click, it'll bring up this weight manager. So if we go to our joints, you can see we have all 3 of these. And it looks like nothing is really painted, probably because these were on top of each other, which is kind of what we wanted to start with. So let's rename these real quick. We'll have joint middle and joint tendrils. So for starters, let's click joint middle, go to commands, and then make sure mode is set to absolute, and then apply all. So now you can see the green here is applied to everything uniformly. So if we grab joint middle and move it, everything moves. And you can see this other joint is left behind. We can actually drop this mirror object inside of joint middle, because the middle will always be anchored in the center. And now for the tendrils, if we select this and then double click our weight tag again to go back into paint mode, by selecting joint tendrils, we can now paint on the blue here. So if we select that, you can see that's being painted. So with this selected, we just want to paint the very tips of all these tendrils. And we need to uncheck visible only. That way it'll paint through to the back-facing polygons. Now I'm just going to paint the very edges of these. And we're going to smooth these out later, so don't worry about getting too perfect. So now if we click on the weight tag here, it'll select all of them. And then going back to commands, shifting the mode to smooth, and then applying all, you can see these smoothing out. So let's see if that's enough. If we click the joint middle and then move that, you can kind of see what we're going for. I think we need to paint a little bit more on the tendrils because you can see they're moving quite a bit, and we want the very tips to be stationary. But now if we rotate this, you can kind of see how these just bend and sway really nicely. So let's try that again and just paint in a little bit more first. We'll go back to joints, select the tendrils, and then if you're not in paint mode, you can just double click the tag. Now I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. Now I'll just single click here, and then we'll smooth again after this. Now select weight to select everything, commands, smooth, and just smooth a whole bunch. Now if we select joint middle, there we go. Now the edges of the tendrils are not really moving, and we're not actually going to be moving the center that much. So If you just look at like this amount, let's close this. You can see that all fits really nicely. And if we rotate, all those kind of bend with it. But you have to be careful. If you go too far, these will start pinching a lot because they're not really preserving volume. They're just bending. So you'll lose some volume there. But just a little bit of bend is fine. I actually think I could paint in a little bit further because it looks like this whole section here isn't really affected. So I'm going to just keep tweaking that a little bit. And I'm going to fast forward this just as I experiment. If you switch from smooth to bleed and then click apply, you can actually grow your selection. So if I do that twice, the blue reaches a lot more in. Then if we select all of these and smooth again, it's a little tricky to get this whole tendril to be this perfect gradient, and there's maybe better ways to do it, but hitting smooth all a whole bunch seems to slowly do the trick. Now this looks really cool, but you can see the middle is not quite painted enough for the middle joint, so we need to fix that. So with the joint middle selected, I'm going to turn down the strength, and the fall off I'm going to make into bell. That way it's a lot softer, so we can paint and not worry about smoothing as much. Okay, I accidentally set the absolute strength to 27. I'll undo that. Instead, I want to do add and keep the strength low so we can just be really subtle about this. And just clicking a couple times looks like it made all that solid. So now if we move this middle joint, it's not bad. I think we still need to smooth it. All right, so it looks like I was finally able to get something that looks pretty nice. As you can see now, when we move this around, it looks like the tendrils are actually stretching properly. And if I rotate, you can really see that nice curve there. And the trick with all this is we're not really using joint chains. We're just using one joint for the center and one joint for all the tendrils. So if I move the tendril joint, all of these move as well. So now with this all set up, let's export this as an FBX and hope it works in Spark. And once we're in Spark, we want to add a few more tendrils in the environment. So I'm just going to copy paste this, delete the skin and the weight tag. I'll just move this forward. I just want to extract one of these tendrils. So using the lasso selection in polygon mode, I'll just drag around here and grab this and hit UP to split this off. Then we can delete this whole mesh here. Then we can center and center that. And we might as well just make this straight up and down. And then edit the axis and change the rotation back to 0, apply, then turn that off. So now we have a zeroed out, nice little tendril that we can use in the scene. And the edges will probably be off camera, but we can just delete a few of these extra polygons. So I'll export that as an FBX as well. So now we should have everything, so we can hop over to Spark in the next lesson.